My girls need a mother with a heart like yours. The cowboy said it in the middle of an empty train depot, as if he had not just spoken the most impossible sentence in the world. Nora Vale stared at him through the yellow station light. 1 hour earlier, she had knocked on a door believing her life was finally about to begin. That door had closed before she could even set her carpetbag down. Now she stood beside the ticket window in a town that did not know her name, with $9 sewn into the hem of her coat, a bruised hope in her chest, and no train coming until morning. The depot in Mercy Crossing was nearly empty. Rain tapped against the roof. The iron stove had gone low. A telegraph key clicked once behind the counter, then fell silent. Nora kept both hands around the handle of her carpetbag because if she let go, she feared she might sit down on the floor and never stand again. The letter was still inside the bag. Mrs. Winthrop had written it in fine blue ink. A respectable home, steady work, a room of your own. We understand your circumstances and will receive you kindly. Nora had read those words so many times on the train that the paper had softened at the folds. But when she reached the Winthrop house, Mrs. looked at Nora's plain dress, her worn gloves, and the small scar near her jaw from a childhood accident. Then her expression cooled. "You are not suitable," the woman said. Nora tried to explain that she had traveled 2 days, that she had spent the last of her money, that the agency in St. Louis had promised this position was settled. But the woman had already stepped back. The door shut with a click so soft, it felt crueler than a slam. So Nora walked back through the rain to the station. She told herself she would not cry. She had learned early that tears did not open doors. They only showed people where to place their boots. A sound came from the far end of the depot. Boots on wet boards. Nora looked up. A man entered, carrying the weather with him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and sun-browned, with a dark coat dripping rain from the hem. His hat shadowed half his face, but not the steadiness of his eyes. He stopped near the ticket counter, then turned slightly. He had noticed her. Nora looked down at once. In her experience, strange men brought questions first, trouble second, and kindness last. But the man did not come too close. "Hard night to be stranded," he said. His voice was low, not soft exactly, more like a door that had been carefully closed. Nora answered without lifting her eyes. "I am not stranded. I am waiting." "For what?" "Morning." The man glanced at the empty track beyond the window. "Morning is a long way off in a place like this." Nora said nothing. "My name is Amos Reed." She looked at him then. "Nora Vale." He gave a small nod, as if her name mattered enough to remember. "Someone was meant to receive you," he said. It was not asked like gossip. It was said like a fact he had already understood. Nora tightened her hands around the carpetbag. They changed their mind. Amos did not pity her. That was the first thing she noticed. He did not say, "Poor girl." He did not ask what she had done wrong. He only looked toward the rain-streaked windows, as if he knew something about being left in a place after promises failed. Before he could speak again, 2 small voices came from outside. "Papa? Papa, we found you!" The depot door opened, and 2 little girls rushed in under the arm of an older man. They were wrapped in wool shawls, both with brown curls coming loose around their cheeks. One carried a rag doll by its foot. The other held a biscuit wrapped in cloth. Amos turned. His whole face changed. "There you are, my wild sparrows." The girls ran straight into him. "You are my wild sparrows." The girls ran straight into him. Nora watched him kneel and gather them both, one under each arm, as if the world had been heavy until that moment, and suddenly became bearable. The older man at the door shook rain from his hat. "They woke before I could stop them." "We were quiet," one twin insisted. "You knocked over the coal bucket," the other whispered. Amos almost smiled. "That is a rare kind of quiet." The twins noticed Nora at the same time. Their chatter stopped. Children saw things grown people tried to hide. They saw trembling hands. They saw loneliness sitting where a smile ought to be. The girl with the rag doll stepped forward first. "Are you lost?" Nora swallowed. "Not exactly." The second girl studied her with solemn eyes. "Then why do you look like you lost something?" Nora had no answer that a child should carry. Amos glanced toward the older man. "Take them by the stove, Father." But the girls did not move far. Their eyes kept returning to Nora. The doll's dress had torn down one side, and stuffing showed near the shoulder. Without thinking, Nora reached into her coat pocket and brought out a needle case. It was the one useful thing she had refused to sell. "You will lose the cotton if it tears much more," she said. The little girl looked down. "Can you fix her?" Nora hesitated, then held out her hand. "May I?" The girl gave her the doll with grave trust. Nora sat on the bench under the dim lamp. Rain moved over the roof. The twins stood close while she stitched the torn seam with small, even motions. She had mended dresses in boarding rooms, shirts in orphan kitchens, and her own stockings by candlelight. A doll's shoulder was easy. When she finished, the girl hugged the doll to her chest. "You made her whole again," she whispered. Something in Amos's expression shifted. He looked not at Nora's dress, not at her scar, not at the carpetbag by her boot. He looked at her hands, careful hands, patient hands, hands that had known broken things, and did not despise them. The older man cleared his throat. "Amos?" But Amos did not look away from Nora. He stepped closer, still leaving space between them. "My girls need a mother with a heart like yours." Nora's breath caught. The station seemed to go still around the words. The twins stared at their father. The older man went rigid. Even the rain seemed to pause before striking the roof again. Nora slowly stood. "You should not say such a thing to a stranger." "I do not make offers to strangers lightly." "You do not know me." "I know enough to begin carefully." "That is not the same as knowing." "No," Amos said, "but it is more than most people bother to see." Nora looked at the girls. They were 5, perhaps 6, with sleep-heavy faces and bright eyes fixed on her as if she might vanish if they blinked. The twin holding the doll whispered, "Papa does not lie." Her sister added, "Only when he says castor oil is not bad." The older man sighed. "That was one time." For one small second, warmth entered Nora's chest. Then fear pushed it away. Kindness that arrived too quickly could become a cage. Nora had seen that. She had lived beneath roofs where every meal came with a debt, and every favor became a chain. "What exactly are you offering, Mr. Reed?" "A room for tonight. Breakfast in the morning. Work if you want it. Time if you need it." He paused. "And if after that you choose the road, I will see you safely to it." Nora studied his face. It was not handsome in a polished way. It was weathered, tired, and honest enough to be dangerous. Honest people could still hurt you. Sometimes they hurt you worse because you believed them first. The older man stepped forward. "Name's Silas Reed. This is my son's ranch outside town. My granddaughters are Clara and Elsie." He looked at Nora with sharp old eyes. "If you come, no one will ask more from you tonight than sleep." That sentence reached her more than the offer. No one will ask more from you tonight than sleep. Nora had been asked for so much in her life. Work, silence, gratitude, apologies for existing. The twins waited. Amos waited. The depot stove gave one tired pop. Nora looked at the dark track beyond the window. There was no train, no waiting family, no room in town she could afford. Only morning, far away and cold. She picked up her carpet bag. "Just for tonight," she said. Clara clapped a hand over her mouth to hold in a cheer. Elsie whispered, "That is almost yes." Amos took Nora's bag, not from her hand, but only after she released it. "That is enough," he said. Outside, the rain had softened into mist. A buckboard waited beside the depot, its lanterns glowing like two small moons. Silas climbed up front. Amos helped the twins into the back, then offered Nora his hand. She looked at it for a moment. Then she took it. His palm was warm and calloused. As the buckboard rolled out of Mercy Crossing, Nora watched the station lamps shrink behind her. She had arrived in that town believing she was unwanted. Now she was leaving with two sleeping girls leaning against her sides. And the strangest part was not that fate had changed. It was that, for the first time in years, she did not want to run from it. It was that, for the first time in years, she did not want to run from it. The Reed Ranch lay 12 miles beyond Mercy Crossing, past wet fields, black fence lines, and low hills silvered by moonlight. By the time they reached the house, Clara and Elsie had fallen completely asleep. Amos lifted Clara. Nora, without being asked, gathered Elsie against her shoulder. The child's head settled beneath Nora's chin with perfect trust. Nora froze. No one had rested against her like that in years. Amos saw it, and for a moment his eyes grew almost painful. The ranch house was built of pale timber and river stone, with a wide porch and a kitchen window glowing amber in the dark. It was not grand like the Winthrop house. It was better than grand. It looked lived in. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, wood smoke, and bread wrapped in a cloth near the stove. Silas led the way down a narrow hall. The girls' room held 2 little iron beds, a shelf of storybooks, and drawings pinned crookedly to the wall. Horses, sons, a woman in a blue dress, a family with one figure missing. Nora placed Elsie in bed and pulled the quilt to her chin. The little girl opened her eyes just enough to murmur, "You fixed Dolly." Then she slept again. Nora stood very still. Amos remained at the doorway. He did not intrude. He simply watched the room the way a man might watch a church after losing the right prayer. "She was 3 when their mother died," he said quietly. "Clara remembers more. Elsie mostly remembers being told to remember." Nora looked at the drawing of the woman in blue. "I'm sorry." "So am I." There was no performance in his grief, no asking to be comforted. That made it heavier. They returned to the kitchen, where Silas set tea before Nora and pretended not to inspect her too closely. "You can sleep in the back room," he said. "It catches morning light. Roof leaks in hard weather, but only over the chair no one likes." Nora almost smiled. Amos leaned against the counter. "You owe us nothing for tonight." Nora looked down at the tea. "People say that sometimes, and sometimes they mean it. Sometimes they mean it until they remember what kindness cost them." Silas's expression softened, though he tried to hide it by stirring the stove. Amos folded his arms. "Then let us be plain. I need help with my daughters, not because they are burdens, because they are children, and children should not have to raise themselves while grown men pretend chores are love." Nora lifted her eyes. "My wife, Miriam, died 3 winters ago. Since then, this house has been fed, cleaned, and kept standing. But it has not been warm enough." His voice tightened on the last words. Nora understood that kind of cold. Cold. It could live in a house with fire in every room. "I can cook," she said. "Sew, read aloud, keep accounts if the hand is clear. I know herbs for fever and poultices for bruises. I was trained as a nursery maid before the household dismissed half its staff." Amos listened carefully, not as if she was proving her worth, but as if every skill mattered. Silas nodded once. "That is more than most applicants bring." Nora looked at him sharply. "I am not applying to be anyone's wife." The kitchen went still. Then Amos said, "Good. A wife is not a position to be filled." That answer disarmed her. "What did you mean at the station, then?" Amos rubbed a hand over his jaw. "I meant what I said poorly. I saw how my girls looked at you. I saw how you handled what was broken. I thought of a thing too big and spoke it too soon." He met her gaze. "I will not ask you for a promise you cannot give. Stay as a helper. Leave when you choose. Let the rest prove itself, or fail honestly." Nora breathed out slowly. Fail honestly. She had never heard a man make room for failure without turning it into a threat. "Then I will stay a week," she said, "as a helper." Clara and Elsie found out before breakfast. They appeared in the kitchen in their nightgowns, hair wild, faces bright. "She is staying," Clara announced, though no one had told her. "For a week," Nora corrected. Elsie counted on her fingers, failed, and decided, "That is many." The first days at Reed Ranch passed with a strange gentleness that frightened Nora more than hardship. Hardship she knew how to survive. Gentleness asked her to believe. She rose before dawn and learned the rhythm of the house. Coffee for Silas, oatcakes for the girls, a tin lunch for Amos and the hands. Mending by the window when the morning chores were done. She found that Clara asked questions like a judge, and Elsie gave affection like rain, sudden and impossible to stop. Clara wanted to know why Nora had no mother. Elsie wanted to know whether scars hurt when people looked at them.
Nora answered what she could. Some scars only hurt when someone is unkind, she told Elsie. Elsie touched the small line in Nora's jaw with one careful finger. Then I will not be unkind to it. Nora had to turn away and fold a dish towel that did not need folding. Amos did not press close. That was the second thing that made her trust him. He gave her work, not tests. Space, not suspicion. He asked her opinion on small things first. Whether Clara was old enough to help gather eggs, whether Elsie's cough needed horehound syrup, whether the girls should keep visiting the creek after last week's rain. By the fourth day, he asked a harder question.
They are lonely. Nora was shelling peas on the porch. The girls were in the yard teaching a barn cat to be a baby. Yes, she said. Amos took the answer without flinching. Even with me? Especially with you, sometimes. That struck him. Nora set down the bowl. They love you. That makes them careful. Children hide their loneliness from the parent who is already grieving. Amos looked toward the yard. Clara had wrapped the barn cat in a blanket. The cat looked insulted, but resigned. I thought keeping them safe was enough, he said. It is the first thing, not the last. The words were plain, but they altered something between them. Not romance, not yet. Respect. Then Mercy Crossing remembered Nora existed. On Saturday, Amos took her and the girls into town for flour, lamp oil, and calico. Nora wore her clean brown dress and a bonnet Clara had insisted looked less sad. The general store fell quiet when they entered. Mrs. Winthrop was at the counter. She turned, saw Nora, and her eyes sharpened. "Well," she said, "you found lodging after all." Nora kept her spine straight. "I did." Mrs. Winthrop looked past her to Amos and the twins. "Mr. Reed, you are generous. Sometimes generosity invites trouble." Amos's face did not change. Trouble usually announces itself louder than Miss Vale does. A few men near the Cracker Barrel chuckled under their breath. Mrs. Winthrop colored. "I only meant that agencies send all kinds. A woman without family should be carefully examined before she is brought around to children." Nora felt the old shame rise hot in her throat. No family, no protector, no one to speak for her. Then Clara stepped in front of Nora, small fists clenched. She fixed Dolly. Elsie stepped beside her. "And she knows when my cough is lying." The store went silent. Amos looked at his daughters, then at Mrs. Winthrop. "My children's judgment has been sounder than most adults this week." Mrs. And Nora wanted to disappear, but Amos did not move in front of her as if she needed hiding. He stood beside her. That mattered. As they left the store, a thin man in a black coat watched from across the street. He had a banker's hat, a silver watch chain, and the unpleasant stillness of someone who counted people the way he counted money. Silas saw him first. "Calder Pike," he muttered. Amos's jaw hardened. "I saw." Nora looked between them. "Who is he?" "No one with a kind reason for looking," Amos said. The answer came 3 days later. A notice arrived at the ranch just after supper. Amos opened it, read the first line, and went very quiet, paper from his hand, and cursed softly. Nora stood by the stove. "What is it?" Amos did not answer at first. Clara and Elsie sensed the change and stopped whispering over their bread. Silas folded the notice. "Calder Pike claims Amos missed the spring payment on the East pasture note." "I did not miss it," Amos said. "Can you prove it?" Amos's silence was the answer. The receipt had gone missing. Pike had purchased the note from a failing bank in Wichita, and now he wanted the East pasture by the end of the month. Without it, Reed Ranch would lose its best grazing land before winter. Nora understood then why Amos carried his grief with such tight shoulders. The house was not only lonely, it was under threat. "That pasture keeps the herd through dry months," Silas said. "Lose it, and we sell half the cattle." Clara's voice trembled. "Will we lose the house?" Amos knelt at once. "No." But Nora heard the fear behind the answer. That night, after the girls were asleep, Amos searched the desk, the tack room, the old account boxes. Silas searched the barn loft. Nora searched the kitchen shelves, where receipts had sometimes been tucked beneath flour tins and forgotten. Nothing. Near midnight, she found Amos on the porch, staring toward the dark east pasture. "I can leave tomorrow," she said. He turned sharply. "Say that." "Because trouble followed me into town, and now people are talking." "This began before you stepped off that train." "Mrs. Winthrop will use me against you." "Mrs. Winthrop has mistaken her opinion for law most of her life." Nora almost smiled, but it faded. "I have been the extra burden in too many houses, Amos. You are not a burden here." "How can you be sure?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because since you came, Clara stopped sleeping with a lamp lit. Elsie stopped asking whether heaven sends mothers back. My father laughs at breakfast, and I remembered the sound of this house when it is not only surviving." Nora could not speak. Amos stepped closer, then stopped himself. "You are not the trouble," he said. "You are what came while trouble was already on the road." The next morning, Nora asked to see every account book in the house. Silas brought them reluctantly. "No offense, Miss Vale, but this is ranch business." Nora tied on her apron. "Then it should have numbers in it." For the first time since she had arrived, Silas grinned. The books were a mess, not dishonest, just tired. Amos recorded cattle counts in one ledger, supply debts in another, wages on loose slips, and bank payments wherever the ink bottle happened to be. Nora worked through them by lamplight for 2 evenings. On the third, she found it. Not the receipt, the pattern. Every payment to the old Wichita bank had been marked with a small black star in the margin. There were 6 stars. Pike's notice acknowledged only 5 payments. Nora checked the dates again. Then she remembered something. "The agency letter," she whispered. Amos looked up. "What?" "The train schedule. I kept it folded in the letter. The conductor stamped it when we stopped in Abilene." Silas frowned. "How does that help?" Nora turned the ledger around. The missing payment was due the same week as the spring cattle sale. You wrote that you sent the money order with Mr. Halden, the freight agent. Amos nodded slowly. "Yes." Halden left Mercy Crossing the next morning on the Abilene train. Nora pulled the folded schedule from her carpetbag. The station stamp proves the train was delayed 2 days by floodwater. If Halden carried the money order, it could not have arrived by the date Pike claims it should have. Silas leaned over the table. Nora pointed to the ledger. "But your note allowed 5 days' grace for weather delays on certified freight packets, copied here from the old bank contract." Amos stared at her. "Pike is counting it as late because he wants the pasture," Nora said. "But by the terms written in your own hand, it was on time." Silas slapped the table so hard the lamp jumped. "Girl, you just put a spine in this paper." But Amos was still looking at Nora, not with surprise that she could think, with anger that anyone had taught her to expect surprise. They took the ledger, the stamped schedule, and the copied contract into town the next morning. Pike was waiting at the bank with Mrs. Winthrop beside his desk, as if cruelty required a witness. He smiled when Amos entered. "Come to discuss surrender terms." "No," Amos said. "Come to correct your arithmetic." Pike's smile thinned when Nora stepped forward and laid the papers on the desk. Mrs. Winthrop gave a small laugh. "Surely you are not letting the girl handle legal matters." Nora's voice was steady. "I am handling dates." There are moments when a room changes because one person refuses to shrink. Nora showed the ledger stars, the due date, the freight notation, the Abilene delay stamp, the grace clause copied from the original note. Pike tried to dismiss the schedule. The town clerk, called in by Silas, did not. By noon, the claim against the East Pasture had collapsed. By 1, the story had reached the general store. By 2, Mrs. Winthrop no longer wished to discuss suitable women. But victory has a way of angering the people who expected obedience. That evening, a storm rolled hard over Mercy Crossing. Wind drove dust before the rain. Thunder moved along the hills. Amos and the hands rode out to secure a broken fence near the South Ravine. Silas went to check the foaling mare in the lower barn. Nora was in the kitchen with the girls when the first scream came from outside. Not human. Horse. She ran to the porch. The small gate near the east paddock had blown open. 2 saddle horses had bolted into the yard, wild-eyed and panicked. Beyond them, the main barn door banged loose in the wind. And Clara was already running. Her rag doll had been left near the rain barrel by the barn. Elsie screamed her sister's name. Nora did not think. She moved. Rain hit her face like thrown gravel. Mud pulled at her skirts. Clara was halfway across the yard when one of the horses reared near the loose gate. Nora reached her and pulled her down behind the chopping block, just as hooves struck the ground where the child had been. Clara sobbed against her. "Dolly!" "Dolly can wait." But Elsie had followed. She slipped in the mud and fell near the open path between the horses and the barn. Nora's whole world narrowed to the child in the rain. She pushed Clara behind the woodpile and ran. One horse charged sideways, not attacking, only terrified. Nora knew frightened animals from the kitchens and carriage yards of her youth. Fear had a direction. You did not stand against it. You turned it. She grabbed the loose feed sack from the porch rail, lifted it high, and snapped it toward the paddock. "Hey!" The horse veered. Nora reached Elsie and dragged her into her arms as the second horse thundered past, close enough that mud struck Nora's cheek. Amos rode into the yard at full speed. He saw Nora on the ground with Elsie clutched beneath her. For one terrible second he thought he had arrived too late. Then Elsie coughed, cried, and wrapped both arms around Nora's neck. Amos was off his horse before it fully stopped. "Nora." "I have her," Nora said, though her own voice shook badly. "I have both of them." Clara ran from the woodpile into Amos's arms, sobbing. Silas came from the lower barn, pale as ash. The storm raged around them, but the family gathered in the mud as if nothing else existed. Amos looked at Nora's torn sleeve, her bleeding palm, the bruise already rising near her temple. Then he looked at his daughters alive in her arms. Whatever careful distance he had held broke. He took Nora's face in his hands with trembling restraint. "You saved them." Nora tried to answer, but Elsie spoke first through tears. "She is our safe place." The words were small. They were enough to end one life and begin another. That night, after the girls were cleaned, warmed, and tucked into bed between many promises that no one was angry about the doll, Amos found Nora in the kitchen, washing blood from her palm. He took the cloth gently from her hand. "Let me." Nora did not pull away. He cleaned the cut with water, and a care so tender it almost hurt. "I was afraid," she said. "So was I." "No, I mean before. It's the station. I was afraid this would become another house where I had to earn the right to stay." Amos wrapped her hand. "And now?" Nora looked toward the hallway where the girls slept. "Now I'm afraid because I already want to." His hand stilled. The rain softened against the windows. Amos's voice dropped. "Want to stay?" Nora nodded. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if receiving mercy and fearing it might disappear. "I love you," he said. "Not because you saved the girls, not because you fixed the books, not because this house needs you." He opened his eyes. "Because when you are here, this place tells the truth about what it wants to be." Nora's throat tightened. "No one has ever loved me without first explaining what I lacked. Then let me be the first fool to do it properly." She laughed once through tears. Amos smiled, and it changed his whole face. "I will not ask you tonight," he said. "Not after fear, not after blood. But when I do ask, it will be because I want Nora Vale, not a helper, not a mother for hire, not a woman the world misplaced." Nora stepped closer. "Ask," she whispered. "I will answer as a woman who chose." Spring turned the ranch green. Pike left Mercy Crossing before the next cattle sale, taking his silver watch chain and his ruined influence with him. Mrs. Winthrop found fewer doors opening to her opinions. The east pasture stayed Reedland. Nora stayed too. Not as a guest, not as a servant. As the center the house had been quietly reaching for.
Clara and Elsie began leaving small gifts outside her door. Wildflowers, crooked drawings, a ribbon for her hair, one biscuit with a bite missing because Elsie had checked it for safety. Silas stopped calling her Miss Vale and started saying, "Our Nora," when he thought she could not hear. And Amos waited until the first warm evening of May, when the girls had fallen asleep on a quilt beneath the cottonwood and the horses moved like shadows beyond the fence. He brought Nora the repaired rag doll. Around its waist was tied a blue ribbon. Threaded through the ribbon was a plain gold ring. Nora looked at it, then at him. Amos removed his hat. "I spoke too soon once," he said. "At a train depot in the rain with two sleepy girls and more hope than sense." Nora smiled, tears already rising. "So this time I will speak clearly. Nora Vale, will you build a life with me? Not because you were stranded, not because we need saving, because this house became home when you stopped being afraid inside it." Nora looked toward the sleeping twins. Clara's hand rested over Elsie's. The rag doll lay between them, whole and worn and loved. Nora thought of the Winthrop door closing. She thought of the station light, the rain, the cowboy's impossible sentence. She thought of every place that had called her unsuitable because it had no room for a woman who had survived. For a woman who had survived. Then she looked back at Amos. "Yes," she said, "and this time, not just for tonight." The girls woke when Amos laughed. They saw the ring and understood enough to scream. Silas came running from the barn with a pitchfork in hand, ready for danger, and found only joy. Years later, people in Mercy Crossing still told the story of the night Amos Reed brought a rejected woman home from the depot. Some told it as a romance, some told it as a miracle, but the Reed family knew better. It was not a miracle that saved them. It was a woman everyone else had measured too quickly. A woman with careful hands, a brave heart, and the quiet strength to make broken things whole again. And in the house beyond the east pasture, where two little girls once asked if heaven sent mothers back, Nora learned the answer. Sometimes, heaven does not send back what was lost. Sometimes, it sends someone who knows what loss feels like, and gives her a door that stays open.